Thank you very much to everybody who's joining us today for our annual review presentation from the Diversity Study Group. My name is Heidi Heseltine. I'm the founder of the Diversity Study Group. And sitting here, can't quite believe it's been 12 months since our last presentation of data for DEI in the maritime sector. And I've been reflecting in the run-up to this on the last 12 months, actually. We have a much broader data set and some really interesting trends emerging and points for consideration, which Jenny Barrow, our director, will be sharing with you. I'm really excited for that because actually now we're in our third year, we're really seeing some interesting trends start to emerge. But in that reflection of the last 12 months, I think and our conference we held in Copenhagen a couple of weeks ago for DEI and maritime, what's really reassuring is that we are definitely seeing commitment to DEI and maritime growing stronger. Collaboration is increasing, industry pressure is increasing. We had the launch of the All Aboard Alliance earlier this year. And really, we're moving very, very firmly away from intent and discussion through to action, an action that's being measured, where we want tangible results, and we're really seeing some fantastic initiatives taking shape. Alongside that, there's a really positive focus on our seafarers as well. Much needed, we know, but really looking at focusing on inclusive cultures on board vessels, raising awareness, zero tolerance on certain elements of behaviour. And that's much needed, not just for those people on board the ships at the moment, but of course for the future people we need to attract as the global talent shortage increases. We've seen very much as well, and this was acknowledged again during the conference, that sharing what's happening in terms of best practice and what we're all doing in the industry when it comes to diversity, equity and inclusion is essential. We see that through our membership community. As that increases, there's some fantastic discussions going on where we're going into great detail on things that are coming up and the challenges we're facing, how we're using the data, what we're doing for emerging areas of importance such as disabilities and neurodiversity, and really using that to help share and collaborate even further. And underpinning all of that, of course, is the data and how we track progress, how we measure, what we measure, equally as importantly. Later on, we'll be hearing from Mia Krogsland-Jorgensen from Hafnia and Andrea Lodolo from Siebel, and really looking forward to them joining us. But first, to kick us off, I'm going to hand over to Jenny Barrow. Jenny is Director of Diversity Study Group and will be talking us through some of the highlights of the results from the annual review. Jenny, over to you.
Thanks, Heidi. And I'm going to start with an apology. I've got a very croaky voice, so I hope that doesn't put anybody off. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm going to go through the highlights of the DSG Annual Review. And if we go to the next slide, Heidi, what you'll see here is the DSG, the Diversity Study Group. We do a range of things, but at its heart, we have benchmarking. We have the collection of data. And this year, we have been thrilled that the data collection that we are going to be talking about, we got the most returns ever, actually. And so we got over 3,000. And if we go to the next slide, Heidi, what we'll see here, we've got that record year of responses. And what that means is that we can do different things with that data and we can begin to track some trends. So this year it's quite exciting when we start to be able to compare. The survey was conducted between January 22 and September, and we cover a range of areas. Today in this session, I'm going to focus on demographic profiling, as well as the inclusion and the belonging questions. There's so much more information that's available to our members. So if you're interested in finding out more, please do let Heidi know. So let us start with female representation. And what we can see here, I would imagine, is quite similar to what you may well be seeing in your own organizations. Overall, we have 58% of respondents were men and 42% were women. But what we can see here is how that differs through seniority in the firm. And as I say, with most organizations, you tend to find that at your senior levels, your C-suite, your head of department, that you will have more men than women. What is interesting this year on this graph, there are two lines in particular. The first is the head of department. And what's interesting is that we have seen a year-on-year rise. So we're at about 23.8% this year, and that rose from 12.3% when we started. So we're really hoping that that trend of seeing women creep through into that level is one that we will continue to see. The other is the mid-level and the team leader, because here we've always seen that there are more women at the junior end. For the last 3 years, that has been apparent. And what we're seeing with that senior team leader, we're beginning to see women breaking through. So it's up from about 30% to 38.3%. So this is looking like progress. This is what we're beginning to see, is that maybe there is progress here in terms of women creeping through, moving through the ranks. But challenges remain. So Heidi, if we go on to our next slide, I just want that the one back. What we'll see here is that we've looked at female representation by function. And what we see here is that you've got more women in your legal, your finance, your support areas compared to technical and IT. We see with ops, technical, IT, that's where predominantly we find men. And so I guess it shows that significant imbalances remain. And what we've got to try and do is find the opportunities to leverage the representation that we have in certain areas and pull them through into other areas. But the good news is the pipeline is there. When we look at age, this has been a familiar picture over the last few years. So there's no real surprises here. I think the key thing here is that over a third of respondents are 45 years old and upwards. And it was interesting at the conference that we had a number of DSG members thinking this could be something they have to watch carefully, because in some key functions, it's dependent on your older employees. And so if you feel that you have an employee base that's moving on, that might be retiring, you really need to focus on that knowledge transfer so that all that know-how doesn't just walk out the door. Ethnicity. We were thrilled this year, actually. We had 98.6% of respondents shared their ethnicity data, which for a global survey, we think is really positive. Again, very similar to previous years, those who identify as white, followed by Asian, are the main respondents. And we find also that that's a similar picture at the senior level. So at your C-suite, your head of department, they tend to be white or identify as Asian. What we've done, and if we go on to the next slide, Heidi, we've crunched the next two positions down. So your senior management and team leaders, because this is the waiting room. Who's in the waiting room? What does that look like? And we've got a little bit of positive messaging here in that we are beginning to see more ethnic representation at these levels, especially at the mid-level. So again, similar to female representation, the pipeline is there. The key issue is how we convert that pipeline and we encourage that pipeline to go through to the more senior levels. Because I'm just going to end on a note of caution here, especially at the mid-level area. That covers a range of job functions, and some of which are not traditionally the feeder roles through to seniority. So there is something there of looking again at who's in that pipeline and what development and what upskilling they might need to position them for leadership roles. But again, we're beginning, this is where the data is really beginning to show us that actually maybe some trends are developing. The other thing this year is that because we had more respondents, we can report on 3 new areas. The first is around disability. We asked, do you consider yourself to have a disability? Here we can see that approximately 4% said yes. The majority said no. We're trying to see, well, what do we make of these figures? Superficially, we think it could be low. And when we couple that with some of the discussions we're having with DSG members, it does leave us with this thought that we perhaps need to do more to encourage people, to show people that it's okay to share the fact that you might have a disability. So we think there might be some more work to do here. The second area is around gender identity. And we asked, do you consider your gender identity to be different from your registered sex at birth? And 3.55% said yes. The majority said no, and we've got 1.8 who said they preferred not to say. I'm going to talk about that prefer not to say in a moment. And then the last area was about sexual orientation. What is your sexual orientation? And you can see here, 2% identified as bisexual, 1.7 gay, stroke lesbian, the majority are heterosexual. What's interesting here is 4% preferred not to say. This is a really important KPI for us. As organisations introduce new questions, often you may find that respondents are thinking, well, why are you asking this? Can I trust you with my data? And so that prefer not to say, what we're hoping will decrease as organisations and their employees get familiar with these kind of questions and are understanding how it's being used. So it's not uncommon to have prefer not to say quite high, but as I say, hopefully it will decrease over time. One of the strengths of the DSG annual survey is that we also ask, as well as the demographic questions, we also ask questions about, well, what does it feel like for you to be in your organisations? That sense of inclusion and belonging. We've got some positive messages here. Do you feel you can be yourself at work? Is it safe to speak up? Do you feel that your overall contribution is valued? Quite high overall responses. Tends to be 79, it's over 80% for do you feel you can be yourself at work? So this is good news. It's a good foundation upon which to build. What is interesting is that when we look at this through the lens of different groups, we do see a slight decrease. And so what we find predominantly is those who identify as white tend to be more comfortable than women who are a little bit more comfortable than those from ethnic minorities, who are slightly more comfortable than those who are LGBT+. So it just shows that there is still work to do here to ensure that everyone feels that sense of belonging. There was one area that really struck us actually, and we asked the question, do you feel able to raise possible discrimination concerns internally? If you remember with those first 3 questions, we were kind of high 70s and 80s. Here, overall, that drops. It's 69% feel comfortable. And we've got 15% overall who say no, they don't feel comfortable. And 14% who are sitting on the fence, who don't know either way. So this is interesting because it wasn't as high as the other areas. And it's also the biggest difference we see between men and women. When we look at this through the female lens, what we find is that 17% of women do not feel this way. And 18% tick they preferred not to say. So this suggests to us that some women still feel uncertain about raising those concerns internally. The other thing we ask is for people just to, we offer a free text option to say, what else do you think your organizations should be doing? I really enjoy this section. It's so interesting. It really gives some flavor to some of the data points. And what we've done here is that we've grouped them. And number one was around equitable policies. People wanting there to be an equitable approach to benefits, to pay, to access to different areas of their organization and their career trajectory. The next one, it was very interesting. This one stood out for me because there was this sense of people wanting to be involved with DEI programs. The impression I get over the years is that some organizations are doing lots around awareness, which is brilliant and a great place to start. And what we're seeing is this maturing and people understanding, they know what's going on, and now they want to know how they can play their part. So it was really telling this year that was emerging. And then we've got a dead heat about the other areas. Diverse representation. There is no two ways about it. People want to see people like them, who talk like them, who look like them, who dress like them at that top level. And there was a lot here about training, actually, and especially the line manager population, wanting to be equipped to deal with their diverse and inclusive teams. So overall, we have found that when we look at the data, when we try and find the themes from it, we're left with some discussion points. And we've got 10 this year, but I'm going to just leave you with the top 5. The good news is that perseverance is paying off. We're finding that our member organizations, the data set is really beginning to grow so we can do more with it. And there is a message here, actually. What we're finding is that there are more organizations within this sector who are now collecting this data and using it to inform actions and decisions. And so if you're not doing this, we would recommend that you start doing so, because there is a risk that you might start falling behind. The other 2 areas, a real sense that this is now, we're going beyond female representation. It is almost as if that may be where organizations start, but diversity is about a whole range of difference and encouraging people to share their diverse perspectives. So there's something here about we need to go beyond female representation now and look at other areas as well. I'm not suggesting that that is done. I'm saying that it's a launch pad for looking at other areas. And we're going beyond diversity. It is about using diversity and moving to equity and to inclusion and belonging. And the other thing, the other area that has really struck us, both through the annual review and the DSG conference a few weeks ago, leadership is critical. Not just in terms of representation at the senior levels, but the inclusive behaviours that your leaders should be demonstrating. It's leaders that give permission for their organizations and their people within it to spend time developing a more diverse and inclusive organization. I'm going to stop here because I've thrown a lot of information at you. We need to pull this to life. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Mia Krugslund-Jürgensen from Hafnia. And Mia is going to share with us some of the work they've been doing at Hafnia in really pulling to life what this means in practice. Over to you, Mia.
Thank you very much. And thank you for taking us through this. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Do you see this? I can't see you, so I really do hope so. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Hafnia and how we work with diversity, inclusion, and equity. I've prepared a short little agenda, a little bit about who we are at Hafnia, about our initiatives, and then also how we believe that leadership is a key measure and a key response to improving diversity, equity, and inclusion. But to start off with Hafnia, Hafnia is both a ship owner, but we're also a commercial operator. So we own, close to 140 vessels, which are both product and chemical tankers. And then we operate an additional more than 100. It brings the total fleet that we have within our commercial management up to 250.
Mia, sorry,
yeah.
Mia, I'm going to just sorry interrupt because I don't think we can see your screen, and I don't want you to. I don't want you to. But I have the slides here, your slides that you sent me. So if you like, I can get those going, and then you just tell me when you want me to ping through.
We can definitely do that.
Shall I do that instead? Bear with me for a moment, and you tell me when you can see this. Hold on 1 second. Let me just come out and come back. Sorry, everybody, a few technical hiccups along the way. That's par for the course with these things, particularly as we move from one to the other. Right. I will just let me do this, and hopefully this will work. The power of. Here we go. Okay, so Mia, hopefully you'll be able to see this as well.
Yes.
Can you see that?
I see them.
Fine, just tell me when you need me to do something. I am here to help.
You just could move to slide number 3.
Got that?
Yes.
That's perfect.
Because that was a little bit about Hafnia. So my next point was going to be on our people first culture. We employ almost 4,500 people. That's both at sea and ashore. Around 5% is shore-based, 95% is sea-based. And ESG is at the heart of our strategy, and this agenda falls closely into the social aspect, and that's why we also give it so much priority. If we then move to the next slide. I just wanted to introduce you to our policy. So at the beginning of this year, we launched a policy which involves both diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity. We've added the belonging because we feel that's a very important parameter of actually having an organization that feels an obligation, that has that closeness, that wants to be part of something, both to the organization, but also employees in between. And I'm not a big fan of policies. I'm going to start by saying that. But I think it's important to write this down as a standpoint, as a commitment. I don't think it should be a compliance based. It should be much more value based. And we anchor this very much within our values. We also have it woven into our practices. So we discuss it a lot when we discuss recruitment, development, progression, and compensation. And we make sure that our managers are very involved in that work as well. If we then move to the next slide, there's a little bit about our initiatives and what we've done. And we'll try to kind of put them into these different headlines, being awareness, training, policies, data, and collaboration. And if we start with the awareness, you also mentioned this, Jenny, this is maybe kind of the first step, making sure that the organization, what's moving. And we have a lot about communicating it within our organization at town hall meetings. We once a month gather the organization, talk about what's going on in the organization. So we make sure that from our CEO, he raises this, what do we have of initiatives, if we have any statistics, anything we want to bring into play. At the same time, we also do it at leadership meetings. We just had a strategy session in September where we gathered our kind of top leadership group, being around 20 people. And we had a workshop with 3 hours talking about people practices and talking about diversity. How do we broaden the aspect of diversity? How do each of them work with diversity? How do we value our culture? What is their kind of our strength? And how do we continue to have that? Then we have done a lot of training. We've both done unconscious bias training, which was mandatory for people managers, but we've also made it voluntarily for the entire organization, because we do see a lot of employees being very interested in the topic. But we've also rolled out a leadership course. So for all people managers, they have to go through what we call ambitious leadership at Hafnia, which is our own program that we developed, which is again a value-based kind of leadership academy. that runs throughout a year. So we want to make sure that it's not just a 3-hour crash course, but it's kind of an ongoing training, because it really does take time. And it's not that we talk about diversity necessarily all the time, but we talk about leadership and how important it is to have empathy as a leader, how important it is to lead different types of personalities, leading at a distance, and how you can become a good leader, because we really believe that it starts with the inclusion, and inclusion starts with leadership. We've also made some policies, as I mentioned in the beginning. I'm not a big fan, but I think it also needs to be there. One of them is our diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity policy, but we also look at our maternity, paternity policies, we look at anti-harassment policies, and we do this both at sea and at shore. Then on the data, which is mainly why we're here, we're also maturing a lot when it comes to data, and we have different sources of data that we use. We have our own HR system, which is very much on the numbers. How many employees do we have? What's the age group? What's the nationality? What is the gender of our group of employees? But we also have an engagement survey, which we're currently running actually, which has some of the softer skills. So again, how do people feel they belong to the organization? Do people feel that their leaders actually live our values? Do they feel they can be themselves? And these are some of the questions that we also see in the diversity study group. And I really enjoy the diversity study group because we can benchmark, because having a number of whatever the number is, 85%, is that good or bad? I think that's difficult to say, because we can always do better. But what does the industry say? So it's good to have that benchmarking. Also, I feel it gives a lot to the organization that we can show that we're doing this along with the industry. And it's also very sensitive data. So I don't want the company to be raising questions about ethnicity or sexual orientation, but when we're doing it as a group and it's kind of at a distance from the organization, I think it makes it more legit, and hopefully it will make people trust the system and know that they can answer honestly. Then there's collaboration, which is also something that we believe very much in at Hafnia. Both transparency and collaboration is very important to us, and we really want to learn more, learn from others, but also share a lot of what we're doing, because we really believe that it's working together that we can make progress. And if we then move to some of the achievements, we have, based on the diversity study group, been able to see that actually our numbers in terms of employees who feel it's safe to speak up and employees who feel that they can be themselves has increased. We've had a lot of focus on training. We also had a lot of focus on mental health. And that may be some of the reasons why we're seeing these increases. And as I said, it's also measuring the soft things, but we also still do measure, and we do put targets on our gender diversity, and we've seen the numbers come up. At sea, we've seen a large increase when we talk numbers. We also have a lot of seafarers, but when we initially set a strategy for improving or achieving a higher number of female representation in our seafaring group, we had basically one female seafarer. We're now at close to 150. When we look at the shore-based organization, we were at 31.6% in 2019, having improved to 33.5 at half year of 2022. And the increase isn't that big, but we've also expanded a lot, and it's been very much within our commercial and our technical organization. So we're actually very pleased with the numbers, and we're also telling ourselves that we need to be patient, which is not necessarily something that we're very good at, because we're very ambitious and we want to see progress. But we really do see that the numbers are creeping up. When we look at the pipeline and the intake, this is also what Jenny presented, but we have a 50-50% split between our trainees that we take in. We've also better equipped our vessels, which means that we have personal protection equipment that are appropriate for females. We also make sure that we have hygiene products on board our vessels, so we make sure that females are also welcome and feel that they have whatever they need when they're on board one of our vessels. Then we have digital innovation, which is on the collaboration side of it. We've run these hackathons, which is kind of an open source project where employees, organization, people, students, everyone can contribute with ideas. So it's really trying to listen to ideas out there and bringing those into a proof of concept to see whether they can work in reality. And if we move on, it's just to say I've shown a lot of kind of what we do, but it's not just a straightforward path, and we do see a lot of challenges. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do as many things, be them small or big, that can actually help, but making sure that we move and we see the progress and we kind of follow the ideas. So we're open and kind of trying to adjust as we go along in these kind of roads. If we then move to the next one, it's just a little bit about the challenges that we see. And some of them are still there, some we have actually passed, but there is an inherent gender divide challenging the pipeline. So this is also what we see when we look at our data, that when we look at entry level, it has a more balanced level of diversity, but moving up, we really do have a challenge. There's also a cultural and generational difference in how we work with diversity, inclusion, equity. So we do see there's a big difference whether you're a boomer, whether you're millennials or Generation C that we're starting to hire now, of how you understand the concept, how open you are. There's also a large difference whether it's a US office, a Scandinavian office, whether you have employees from Eastern Europe or Asia. So it's difficult to work with a plan to roll out kind of a global plan because it's very different where we are. So we need to cater for this. And that's also why we really believe in making a lot of different small initiatives, because not all of them will hit kind of our target group. And then there's the consideration and measuring diversity, because it's moving beyond gender, but how do we actually do that? Gender is more simple, it's something more tangible for us to measure, and a lot of the time we see that discussion kind of ends with gender. So when we try and open up the discussion for a broader diversity topic, we end up discussing gender because we're used to that, and now we've become small experts within the whole gender discussion, but we need to really broaden it, and we need to continue to challenge ourselves to actually move it into action when it comes to that broader perspective. When we look at C, we also see a number of challenges, and one thing is that there's been a historic lack of data. A lot of the individuals working with diversity are placed on shore. A lot of us haven't actually sailed, so we don't have that background, but it's such a big population of our organization that's sailing, so we really need to be curious as to what's going on out there. We need to get the data, and we need to get input from the seafarers to understand how we can actually improve the diversity at sea as well. And there is a historic lack of women on board, so it's also difficult to get that data. There's also been this narrative and perception of a hostile environment. I think it's really important that moving forward, we also talk about all the good things about being a seafarer, how interesting it is, how you get to see the world, how it could be an opportunity. So it's also about finding pools of talents where it's an opportunity to go sailing. So that's something we're working with as well. And then there's the whole family and maternity and paternity planning, because establishing a family as a female seafarer can be challenging. So how do we cater for that? Because females should be able to go have a family, but also be able to go back sailing if they wish, or to pursue a career at shore if that's their wish. So that's some of the challenges. If we then move forward, we put in a straight line, but as I just said, it's not as straight as it looks. We've put in some targets, so we have some targets for our female representation, but I think what is even more interesting is that we have an ambition of setting additional targets. So we really want to broaden that perspective. And we also want more transparency when it comes to our seafaring community and set targets, because we've had internal targets, but I think the commitment of saying it out loud will help us also progress further. But we also, in terms of kind of getting there, we want to bridge the gap. So we want to use data to make sure that we know what's going on, bridging the gap, having the right policies in place. We look a lot at recruitment and retention. What is it we're doing? We use gender decoders to make sure our ads are gender neutral. We focus a lot. We're doing a new website currently, kind of how do we phrase the wording there, make sure we have diversified role models on our social media channels where we do a lot of employer branding. But also retention, making sure that we know when people leave us, why do they actually leave, what makes people want to stay. Then there's education and awareness, because we've done a lot of training, but it's an ongoing. We have new managers, and we need to continue. We need to heighten the bar all the time, because the agenda is moving so fast. And then there's collaboration. So what we're doing here today, coming together, sharing data, sharing ideas and knowledge. So we still believe that that's a way forward in terms of achieving the targets. The next slide is a little bit on our seafarers and what we do here, and everything is anchored within the leadership training, because it's a different organization we have on board our vessels. We see, I sometimes imagine a small kind of factory sailing around the world, because they have their own senior leadership on board each vessel. And when you have more than 100 vessels, you have a lot of leadership teams that you need to make sure are aligned. And we also need to make sure they're aligned to what we do at shore. We also need that data, and we've tried to gather and also share. So if anyone has an interest, we've done kind of some of the key learnings from our Women in Maritime lab. So some of the ideas we've tried to group, what is it we see of ideas coming in, and what can we actually learn from that? Because these ideas actually highlight some of the issues that we see. And then there's the whole personal protection, making sure that our vessels are equipped for having females on board. Then there's a talent pipeline, making sure we are at the educational institutions where there are females, making sure that the institutions are ready to educate our diversified employees or students. Then there's the policies at shore or at sea, which I think are even more important, making sure that no female is alone on board, making sure that we have a diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, and we're transparent, and make sure there's training on it. Then that's rollout, and then there's the whole maternity. So I'm running a little fast because I know time is running. Last slide is just about collaboration. I think I've mentioned this, but just I'm a very strong advocate for this. The Diversity Study Group is one example. The All Aboard Alliance, which is part of the Global Maritime Forum, is another initiative where our CEO co-chairs this alliance. And then there is this Maritime DEI Lab, which we also really think brings a lot to the agenda, because we see ideas coming to life. So that's a little bit from my side, Heidi.
Oh, Mia, that's a lot from your side, and thank you so much. I'm just going to stop the share there. And I mean, what an amazing amount for us to consider, and for the audience. Thank you so much. I think one of the things I picked up that you said right at the start there was, you know, it starts with inclusion, and inclusion starts with leadership. And you've exemplified that throughout everything that you've shared across the seafaring and the shore. And what we're going to do, so we're going to come back to a Q&A for everybody who's here, and I can see we've got a brilliant audience with us at the moment. We have Andrea Lodolo with us now. Andrea is the CEO of Seably. Very much committed to DEI as well, to the extent that Andrea is joining us from an airport, and he's mid-transit of flight. So we're going to see if we can bring Andrea in, and if it doesn't work, then obviously we'll move on to our discussion and the Q&A. So let's have a look and see if we can make this work. And Andrea, I can see you. Can you hear us? Thank you so much for your commitment to joining mid-travel.
Hello, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Good.
So
maybe, yeah, if you can just use the slide, it will be great, because I
think we have a slight technical challenge with the slides, Andrea. So what we could do, if it's easier, is move directly into the Q&A, or if you'd like just to give a short introduction to your elements on the working week, and obviously the fact that, you know, the remote element of your workforce. I will be,
I will be telegraphic. So welcome. Thank you very much for having me today, and welcome in Sibley. Sibley, as you some of you know, it's you know, a new player in the maritime ecosystem, growing skyrockets. And so when we start from a white canvas, and therefore diversity, for various reasons. One of the reasons I'm affected by Asperger's, so I have an autism spectrum, so it touched me in art, you know, and in my own life. So diversity for us was since day one, you know, a goal. And let's see how we try to achieve this goal. We have two essential ingredients. One is a full remote company. Now, when you work remote, you lower the barrier and you encourage diversity. And we can expand on that a lot, but I'll let you think about that a bit, because remote work welcome diversity, and diversity welcome remote work. And the other thing is that we work 4 days a week. We are part of a global panel called 4 Days a Week Global. It's an NGO based in New York, so we are more than 3 million people. We think that the 5 days a week, especially for you know, for a software company, is not, or for not asset-driven company. It's just a reaction of the first industrial revolution. We want to do an impact, or we want to have an impact on the society, and we work only Monday to Thursday. And this welcome diversity. Why? Because we all know that if we talk about gender, you know, people, mothers, they normally need a little bit more time, especially when they're babies, right? And so 4 days a week can really help. First of all, to recruit in a more diverse way, and second, to have a better life balance. And ultimately, and then I give back the floor. And sorry for, you know, I really appreciate the presentation of Mia, and now I want to, you know, be really short in mine. I think that we are investing quite a lot in neurodiversity. And when I say investing, means exploring, means try to recruit neurodiverse talent. Because if diversity is an iceberg, we talk always about gender, about, you know, sex habits, but we have to think that neurodiversity has no gender. Okay, we need to think that neurodiversity is something that affects all of us. We are all neurodiverse, and some of us are neurodiverse talents. So one of the challenge of large corporation and small company like us maybe is to find the way to welcome neurodiversity within the ecosystem of the company. And with this, with a big thank you to the diversity study group, I was very impressed for the job done. I'm really interested in all the data, and I hope to contribute more in the future. And of course, I'm available for anyone in the audience if they want to reach out to me. I have a lot of materials on neurodiversity on 4 days a week and remote work that I will be more than happy to share with the floor. Thank you all.
Andrea, thank you so much. I think it's really interesting what you say there, and I think also just this week alone I've been having a chat with an organisation who are looking at getting some data with respect to neurodiversity at sea. So perhaps for Mia and Andrea, I might be having a chat with you offline about that, because it's be great if we can start looking at getting some more data on that in order to provide, again, some more examples of how to support and you know, support that community at sea and ashore. So now what we're going to do is just move to a discussion, open the floor to any Q&A that there may be. So I'm just going to bring in Mia, and I'm going to bring in Jenny as well. Bear with me for a moment. There we are. The gang's all back together. Andrea's in the airport. So I'm going to steal one of Jenny's questions here, which is, when we're coming from this, what are your like key takeaways from what you've heard so far today? And I'm actually going to put that question straight onto you, Jenny, because I know you've been listening there from to Mia's presentation, and there was so much in that as well. I know you'll have been frantically taking things away from that. What was one of the things that you took away from that?
Well, and it's something we might want to talk about later anyway, about leadership and also how that cascades down to line managers. So that's key. But perhaps something to start with, and actually it's a shame we've just lost Andrea, because I think what he might be seeing might be similar. But me, I was really taken about the generational differences. So I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that, because as the DSG survey shows, we've got an older generation, and we know that generation might well be moving on. And the expectations of new entrants and younger entrants into this sector can be quite different. So I'd be intrigued to hear a little bit more about that.
No, and I think what I said was most in context to how we run initiatives, but I think your question is more in terms of kind of succession planning within the company, and I think that's definitely something to be aware of, and we do see that as well when we look at our leadership level. Obviously, there's a natural kind of people moving as they gain experience. But we are very focused on that kind of middle manager level, because I really think that's where we need to focus. And to your point as well about making sure that we have the diversified talents kind of in the right positions, because we know that having P&L responsibility is usually what will make you potentially a C-suite material. So we've done a lot of kind of effort in terms of moving more focus on the commercial organization when it comes to diversity.
Yeah.
And we've already got a question for you from the audience, Mia. Jim Baskerville from TK. Hi, Jim. It says, do your statistics vary by location?
They do. I'm not sure how you mean vary in terms of what varies, but obviously we have offices in many different locations. We look at the offices individually, we look at departments individually, and then we look at the organization as a whole.
Which makes, and again, it goes back to what you said as well, I think, during your presentation, which we very much see when we're having the networking in DSG and you know, bringing together, if you like, the DEI community, is actually particularly when you're global, things have to be, you've got such different needs in your different locations and such different representations, don't you? That
exactly.
You know, you really need to cater to that to
yes.
land.
And I think be very curious to what the organization feels, right? So one way of getting input is through these surveys, but another one is also making sure that the leaders are equipped to take on that input. Yeah. Making sure, now I'm going to visit our Singapore office next week, and also I plan to have some workshop also kind of to just hear what's going on, what's motivating you guys, what do you hear, how do you feel, is it too much, is it not enough, what works for you? So kind of getting that information and really taking it in as much as possible to get that whole involvement.
I think, sorry, Heidi, you
go.
I think that's really crucial, and it was something else I picked up in terms of how you differentiate your application of your insight. And that's what we find with organizations that are more mature. What they're doing, the questions that they're asking in different offices in different regions are a lot more specific to the issues in that particular area. So yes, you need to be globally consistent, but there needs to be a specific lens on different local areas, seafaring versus onshore. So the more granular we can be, I think the more improvement you will see in a particular area. It's really hard to be too general in this area, I think.
Absolutely. I think the other point as well that we've touched on previously, not within this discussion, but is also on certain areas. When you look at DEI, you've got certain local support in place. So it was really interesting. We were looking at having our disability discussions within the networking recently to also learn about how Singapore is really trying to drive progress in that area. So also what we tend to see is, and what we can see is that in certain regions, there might be more focus given to an area also tied in with what's available locally to support the drives and the initiatives and what's being piloted in the local areas as well. So it's been quite interesting to see that too. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I think we have another one come in. Obviously, we can look at the we can look at things from the data. We can look at questions for Mia. Any more general questions that anyone has? We've got a couple of minutes left. I think Mia, Jim would like to connect with you once you're in Singapore, so we can certainly facilitate that. That's what we're here for as well. So happy to do that. Was there any? Yeah.
In terms of the other thing I was struck by, I think there is something, what I also heard was around, which both Mia and Andrea, was around the storytelling. So it's trying to dispel any myths. It's trying to paint a picture of, well, what is it really like to be a seafarer? And I think that principle can be applied to other areas too. The same with leadership. I think within organizations, people might not understand, actually, this is what a leadership role entails. This is what a day in the life of a leader can really help people understand, well, actually, maybe I would be able to do that. Because so often the route to leadership you've got lots of unwritten rules. People may not be, organizations sometimes aren't particularly transparent about, well, this is the career path, or this is what we're looking for when we think about a leader. And so I think that I'm left with, and it's the same with the conference, Heidi, where we see challenges, there's an opportunity for us to make this sector really attractive to people from a whole range of different backgrounds.
Thanks, and I think we're seeing that coming through, and I think it's I think one of the things that struck me from today, but also from the conference as well, was very much about the leadership, but the appetite, the collaboration. So it's actually, so if you look back a couple of weeks ago to when we were all together in Copenhagen, it's very much around the leaders working together, an organizational, but at an industry level as well, to really put forward change and drive it. And if you look at, Mia, taking what you were talking about in your presentation, you're doing that at an industry level through the All Aboard Alliance Diversity Study Group, but through the Maritime DEI Lab as well. You're offering to share information on some of what you're seeing from for the women at sea, as well as really driving some great initiatives locally. So I think for me, that's one of my key takeaways as well, is the passion for this. I think it's inspirational what people are doing and how we're sharing the initiatives. And you're right, Jen, from a leadership perspective, and I think the discussions we're having outside of this as well, about equipping leaders at all levels within a business to be able to really not only lead by example, but also when people come to them, because they're feeling more included and they have a culture of belonging, being able to equip with also the things that come back at them. Because if we know as well that it's great to be able to do the work, but if the leaders aren't equipped well to be able to have those conversations when their team members are coming to them, that can be quite challenging for those individuals as well. So there's a lot of work being done around that, I think, as well, that we're seeing. So, well, I think if we don't have any other questions for now, we're at our time as well by the time we wrapped up. I think from all of us, it's really interesting to see those trends developing. I think, Jenny, from what you presented on the data, if we fast forward 12 months, what will we be saying? What will we see when it comes to that waiting room for talent? We know when we're looking at the data, we have access to broader diversity than we're seeing represented at the moment in senior management, and that particularly not only through gender, which we quite often turn to first, but also through the ethnicity element as well. So personally, I'm really excited to see what that trend shows in 12 months' time, but also how will we have progressed on other areas in another year when we're looking at things like disabilities and neurodiversity, when we're looking at the seafaring population. And I think, Mia, you're absolutely right, we need more data on the seafaring side. And I would also just use this opportunity, if anybody here is interested in getting more data for the seafaring community when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to diversity, in addition, obviously, to Mia, the work you've been doing on the gender side, Diversity Study Group also has a few things underway that we're going to be talking to our members about very shortly. But if anyone else is interested in joining that discussion, please do get in touch. I think the insights we've had from yourself, Mia, but also from Andrea at an industry corporate level, and again, spanning sea and shore, have been fantastic and invaluable to the collaboration that we're seeing. I think you're only driving more inspiration. So thank you so much for that. And I think for everybody today, I just hope you've come away with a better understanding of the state of play of the headlines of DEI and maritime, as well as some of the detail of the initiatives being done. Mia, thank you so much. Andrea, obviously, unfortunately, we've lost him at his airport on the other side of the world, but a big thank you to Andrea as well. Jenny, thank you as well for your brilliant presentation on the data. We are going to be uploading this on our YouTube channel. There's also going to be an interview that we've done with Yasmin Chinwala, who's a partner at New Financial. So we're trying to get some insights from other sectors and looking at the finance sector, who are ahead, and also the work they've done from Women in Finance Charter on data. So we'll be loading that there. Any questions anyone has, please reach out, and we can go from there. We have one question before I go, Mia. You haven't escaped yet. Sorry. If we've got time to quickly go through. We have a question here from Amita. Do you see that to encourage women at sea, we should also focus on making a strong impression and sharing inputs at college level and encouraging graduate female hiring?
I definitely think so. I think that's one of the key things that we need to focus on, is getting out to the educational institutions and making sure we show that pathway forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the last question from Peter about data from ports, and perhaps we can connect on that one outside the conference. Certainly be interested in having a chat with you about that. And then we can take that forward there as well. If anyone does have any other questions, you know where to find us. Please do get in touch. We're always here, not just when we run this event annually. We've got the membership community, as you said. Come along, join us there. More collaboration, more sharing. But otherwise, thank you so much, everybody, for today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.